Good morning, a warm welcome to Kit Guru. I'm Chris and today we are checking out a pre-built system, the PC Specialist Odin i7 Ti Air. But is it any good and is it worth you spending your hard-earned cash on? Let's take a closer look to find out. The PC Specialist Odin i7 Ti Air arrives in a rather nondescript box with very little information to the outside to indicate what has just landed on our doorstep. Opening up the packaging, we find our system is well protected, surrounded by foam and complemented with an accessories box. PC Specialist also included foam packaging to the inside of the case for transport, and this is there just to help protect the components a little bit further. The accessories box includes all the additional cables, brackets and screws from our components, and it's great to have these included so that any potential future upgrades can be accommodated without having to try and source any extra screws or mounting hardware. It's here that we also find our power supply dust filter, component manuals and power cord. With the system now out of the packaging, we can go through the specs on the Odin i7 Ti Air. Housing everything is the Cooler Master Masterbox TD500 Mesh ARGB case. There's an Intel Core i7-12700K, Gigabyte Z690 UD DDR4 motherboard, 32 gigs of Corsair Vengeance DDR4, 3200 MHz in a 2x16 configuration. Our graphics card is the Gigabyte Eagle OC 8GB NVIDIA RTX 3070 Ti. Storage is covered by a 1TB Samsung 970 Evo Plus M.2 PCIe NVMe, and our secondary drive is a 2TB Seagate Barracuda, a 7200 RPM spinning drive. Power is delivered from the Corsair 650W CXM semi-modular 80 Plus bronze. We have a PCS Frostflow 150 series CPU cooler, Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5 PCIe add-in card, and all of this is running on Windows Home 11 64-bit. Looking at the specification then, we get quite a lot for our money. A good processor, ample storage and memory, and of course a graphics card. That's something that's been relatively unobtainable outside of a pre-built system in recent times, and where people have been able to get their hands on one, generally it's been at rather an inflated price. Granted, things are starting to calm down. So if you don't fancy building your own system, then PC Specialist is offering this for £1,849. That includes free delivery and their standard 3-year PC Specialist warranty. Taking a close look at the components themselves, the Cooler Master TD500 Mesh ARGB feels like a really well built chassis, and in terms of aesthetics, with the sliced tempered glass side panel, it's rather a nice looking case. Given this is a mesh case, airflow isn't badly restricted to the front intake, so we are expecting to see some good thermal performance later on. The case does have scope for some future upgrades as well. It can support two 360mm radiators and can hold up to four 2.5-inch drives or two 3.5-inch drives and two 2.5-inch drives. It also includes three ARGB fans, a magnetic top filter, an easily removable front panel to provide access for cleaning, and a slot-in power supply dust filter. Remember though that the filter for this is included in the accessories box, so you would be forgiven for getting about it when you're first setting up this PC. The TD500 also comes with two USB 3.0 ports, a headphone and microphone jack for the front I/O. The Intel Core i7-12700K is a 12-core 20-thread CPU comprising of 8 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. The 12700K offers solid performance and better value than the 12900K, but as recommended by our very own Leo, the 12600K would be the more budget and value oriented choice if you were putting a system together yourself. I can't fault PC Specialist going with the 12700K though. It is a great CPU and should perform very well in both gaming and productivity tasks later on. PC Specialist have opted for the Gigabyte Z690 UD60, an ATX DDR4 based motherboard rather than going for the DDR5 option, and I think this is a good area to save some of the cost involved, and it helps keep the price low for the consumer. The motherboard includes 3 M.2 slots, all capable of running PCIe Gen 4 at by 4 speeds, 1 via the CPU and 2 via the chipset. 1 is populated, but there is plenty of room for further storage expansion down the line, as we also have 6 SATA connectors here too. For the rear I/O, we have a good selection of connectivity options. Sadly though, there is no onboard Wi-Fi, and so PC Specialists have thrown in one of their own add-in cards to the lower PCIe slot. We also have Intel integrated graphics on the 12700K, so should we run into any issues, we can connect directly to our motherboard via HDMI or DisplayPort for video output. For our memory kit, we had 32 gigs of Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 at 3200 MHz with timings of 16, 18, 1836. Vengeance kits are tried and trusted. They perform really well, but if you're looking for something with a little RGB, then you are out of luck here. PC Specialist have kept it really nice and simple, no fuss, just a memory kit that does exactly what it says on the box. For storage, we have a Samsung 970 EVO Plus NVMe drive at 1TB capacity, meaning there is plenty of space for files, documents and games. But if that's not enough, we also have a 2TB Seagate Barracuda 7200 RPM spinning drive. Yes, they are starting to show their age, but again, for sheer capacity, and remembering the price point that we're at, then it's a standard configuration, and it just helps to ensure that you have a snappy and really responsive operating system, and you will then still have plenty of space for ever-growing Steam libraries. For graphics, we have a Gigabyte Eagle OC RTX 3070 Ti, and this is an 8GB card with Gigabyte's WindForce 3 alternating spinning fans cooling solution. It has 6144 CUDA cores, GDDR6X memory, 19,000 MHz memory clock speed with a core clock of 1800 MHz, a 30 MHz boost from the reference design. PC Specialist also includes an anti-sag bracket with this, which is a really nice touch from them. The 30 series cards are quite chunky, so having just a little bit of extra support is a much welcomed addition. Sure, it's not the sturdiest bracket I've ever seen, but this inclusion does show that PC Specialists are paying attention to their systems and looking after their customers. The Corsair 650W CXM semi-module power supply has been used in the Odin i7 Ti Air. Again, it's another trusted component from Corsair, but it is only a 80 plus bronze rated unit, meaning that it sits at the lower end of the efficiency scale. Being semi-modular though, it allows for any unneeded cables to be kept out the equation, and while we would have preferred to see maybe a silver or even a gold rated power supply unit here, it's certainly not a deal breaker. PC Specialist have kept the mounting correct for it as well, with the fan facing the bottom of the case so it can draw in cool air from underneath. The TD500 does come pre-installed with three 120mm ARGB fans, and PC Specialists have added in a rear exhaust 120mm non-RGB, while our CPU is cooled by the PCS FrostFlow 150, featuring a push-pull configuration. On closer inspection, the FrostFlow 150 is actually a rebranded ID Cooling SE225XT. When I was searching for this on the internet, it seems it's a cooler that's getting a lot of positive feedback, so it'll be interesting to see how it performs later on. The CPU cooler also winds up nicely to the rear fan too, meaning that all that warm air is going to be exhausted straight out the back of the case. Now, if you saw Dominic's recent video on the PC Specialist Magnus Spark, he commended them for their cable management on that system. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. And the cable management's no different here. They've done an exceptional job keeping everything really nice and tidy. I had one really slight niggle, and it's just the front USB motherboard connector. It's been zip tied just a little bit too tight, pulling the connector so that it's under tension on the motherboard. It's a really tiny oversight, and we've easily fixed it. We've just pulled through a little bit slack on the cable, but overall it is an exceptionally well built system. You could spend all day changing out the configuration of systems on PC Specialist's website, trying to juggle around hardware for the best bang for your buck, but overall they've done a great job with the Odin i7 Ti Air. There are a couple of small bits I would personally change. First, I would like to see PC Specialist use an equivalent motherboard to the Gigabyte model that's here, but one that comes with built-in Wi-Fi. This would just help free up that lower PCIe slot should you be looking to add in any other expansion cards. Having said that, it's only going to be a really small percentage of people who would look to do something like this, and my advice would be to go with an Ethernet based connection where possible. If you don't have access to Ethernet and you really do need that Wi-Fi, then at least you've got this add-in card, but I think it'd have just tidied up that system just a little bit more. The power supply is another area I would potentially look to change, throwing in maybe a higher efficiency unit. Again, it is only a really small element and it certainly doesn't make or break this system. system by any stretch of the imagination. Moving on then, let's go through all of today's benchmarks, starting with Cinebench R23. The PC Specialist Odin i7 Ti Air with the 12700K scored 22,694 points on multi-core with 1,944 points on single core. When we compare this with Leo's 12700K, we can see we are right on the money in terms of performance, even edging his chip out slightly. In Ada 64, our 32 gigs of Corsair Vengeance 3200 came in with some good numbers, both read and write results, capping out at 46,708 megabytes per second read and 46,783 megabytes per second write. Next we have PC Mark X. This gives us an overall picture of how the Odin i7 Ti Air performs, and while we don't list any direct comparisons here, it is a great way to test your own system and compare it to the pre-built from KitGuru that we've tested before. Overall we score 8,530 points, 11,666 points in Essentials, which covers areas such as app startup and web browsing. We scored 10,575 points in productivity, so writing and spreadsheet based tasks, and finally 13,654 in content creation. That includes photo editing, video editing and rendering. Our Samsung 970 EVO Plus scored exactly as expected in Crystal Dismar 8 with reads of 3,570 megabytes per second and writes of 3,313 megabytes per second. Our secondary drive, the Seagate Barracuda, again as expected scored 228 megabytes per second reads with 212 megabytes per second write. Our TimeSpy CPU scores comfortably better than the 12700K's little brother, the 12600K, coming in at 15,769 points. Leo's 12900K scored 18,032 points, so we are right in the middle of terms of performance. On the GPU side of TimeSpy, the Gigabyte RTX 3070 Ti hit 14,938 points. That's over 1,200 points more than the 3070 FE. Compared to a 3080 FE coming in at 17,941, however, it lags behind by 3,000 points. It's again at the point expected, tucking neatly into Nvidia's 30 series lineup. Moving on to our game benchmarks, all of the following tests were conducted using the title's built-in benchmarking tools. This way, you, the viewer, are able to recreate these tests exactly as we have to see just how your system compares. If we ran real-world game tests, then it makes it so much more difficult to try and compare these and draw a comparison. Each test was ran using the Ultra or the preset equivalent at 1080 and 1440p resolutions. First up we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Here we run the full built-in benchmark. It's an older title but it still looks absolutely beautiful, hitting almost 179 frames per second at 1080 and 130 frames per second at 1440p, with the 1440p 1% low, just a touch under the 100 frames per second mark. Forza Horizon 5 brings fast-paced racing action, reaching 116 frames per second average at 1080p with 92 frames per second at 1440. Anyone who plays this title will not be disappointed with the 3070 Ti performance that is packed into this system. Next up is Red Dead Redemption 2, using the benchmark scene where Arthur robs the shop in Saint Denis. At 1080p we're getting just over 90 frames per second, and then at 1440 we are sitting at 75 frames per second with a 1% low of 57.6. Our fourth title takes us to Guardians of the Galaxy. We see some great frame rates here, 166 frames per second at 1080p, while at 1440 we can enjoy smooth gameplay at 122 frames per second. Our lows are still nice and high though, a shadow under 100 frames per second at 1440p using the full built-in benchmark. Finally, we have Rainbow Six Siege, still a really popular esports title, and it brings up some huge numbers. First at 1080p we are hitting 481 frames per second, and then at 1440p that drops down to a paltry 320 frames per second. Moving on to the noise levels from the Odin i7 Ti Air. At idle it sits comfortably at 39 decibels, while when we start gaming this rises to around 44 decibels. It's not particularly loud or distracting, and when you strap on some headphones or crank up your speakers, then it's not going to even be noticeable. Things then do start getting just a little bit louder when we run Cinebench R23, raising the volume to around 50 decibels. We could probably reduce these results a little bit if we started messing around with the fan curves, but we're running these tests with this system as it would be delivered, so that gives you a real world look at how this system will perform straight out of the box. Next we are looking at temperatures. The Cooler Master TD500 performs really well with those 3 included front fans, and with it being an airflow orientated case, our idle temperature of 31 degrees is perfectly acceptable. When we started running a 30-minute Cinebench R23 loop, we hit 93 degrees with the PCS FrostFlow CPU cooler, doing its very best to keep the 12700K cool. Our GPU also performs well, sitting at 35 degrees when at idle, and it moves up to 70 when running our Forza Horizon 5 benchmark. Our final test looks at the power consumption of the Odin i7 Ti Air. With a fresh startup and the system settled, we saw it sitting at 60 watts at idle. When we started running Cinebench R23, this increases to just shy of 300 watts, hitting a maximum value of 292 watts. During Forza Horizon 5 session, playing at 1440p, we peaked at 397 watts total system power draw. Overall, the Odin i7 Ti Air offers plenty of headroom from the 650 watt Corsair power supply, meaning that future upgrades would not necessarily require a PSU upgrade as well. So then, the PC specialist Odin i7 Ti Air seems to offer a lot of performance for your money, but is it good value? To see if I could put this system together any cheaper, I hopped on over to PC Part Picker. I've dropped in the exact same components, but I have had to edit some of the retailers just to get the best price possible. Once I've done that, I found that give or take 15 or 20 quid, you could build this system yourself for around the same price. Don't forget though, PC specialists are not only building this system, they are shipping it to you for free for their price of £1,849, plus they are dropping you a 3-year warranty too. Overall then, the value is there, the build quality is certainly there, and there's also none of the hassle of building this system yourself. The Odin i7 Ti Air, as it stands, provides more than enough performance and value, but there is so much room for upgrades too, for when you actually need them. When you get to that point, the Odin will have served you really well, providing an excellent value-conscious system that just does what it does and does it really well. Would I recommend this? Absolutely. As a pre-built, it is spot on. Okay, it's not flash with loads of baked-in RGB. This, as I say, is a system that is just more than content with just sitting there quietly, doing what it does and doing it exceptionally well. So that's it, the PC specialist Odin i7 Ti Air. Is this a system you would contemplate buying if you was in the market for a new pre-built? Let us know in the comments. As always, if you haven't already, then please do consider supporting the Kit Guru channel by hitting that subscribe button and notification bell. You can also come and chat with us over on the Kit Guru Discord server. The link for that is in the video description below. That is it for today. This has been Chris for Kit Guru. See you again soon.